Hi, guy number 2 here, and it's time we get to last week's challenge in KSP2. The challenge was to follow in the footsteps of Apollo 11, which meant get to the Moon, drop a lander, avoid hitting Neo, rendezvous with the main rocket, discard the lander and fly back to Kerbin. I decided to try and build a replica of the original Apollo 11 Saturn V rocket. This would have been much easier in KSP1 given the historic pieces, such as the landing module, but I actually really enjoyed the challenge and creative freedom for not having the exact pieces. Anyway, if we take a look at the Apollo 11 replica I built, then we first have the command module, which sits on top of the service module, which will be the main vehicle to and from the Moon. Next up, we have my homebrewed lander module, which I actually think turned out pretty well, even though it doesn't have quite the same bulkiness. Underneath we have the third stage. This carries the instrument unit, which in KSP was just a reaction wheel. Then we have the second stage with 5 vector engines. And finally we have the first stage, which uses 5 mainsail engines. First thing to do was to test the launch escape system. All in all, it was safe-ish. Next thing to do was to test how the rocket behaved, and to my surprise it was actually an okay experience to fly it. The first patch has really helped with having multiple engines. The only thing that was acting up was, for some reason, the RCS thrusters on the landing module, which bounced around too much and then would suddenly fly off. After a little bit of tweaking, it was time to set off. I could and probably should have decreased the amount of fuel on some of the upper stages, since I also had way more Delta V than needed. But on the other hand, there is something majestic about having a rocket ascending slowly. Given that the lander module still was a little bit shaky, I decided to wait with the gravity turn till the first stage had burned out. During the second stage, we got rid of the escape system. The second stage eventually burned out and left the third stage to do the rest of the orbital burn to obtain an orbit at around 100 and 130 kilometers. I got ready to do a transfer burn and got the intercept course with the Moon. And now it was time for one of the more interesting parts of the journey. The flip of the service module to dock with the lander. It was at this point I realized that Tim had snuck on board. I know it's a small thing, but it really annoys me, because I had earlier made sure to empty a seat, but because I reverted that lunch, it decided to fill up every empty seat. Which now meant that Tim had to face the cold hard fate of being left in space, since the lander module was to be left in orbit around the Moon, and therefore there would only be room for 3 Kerbals back to Kerbin. My idea was that since there isn't any heat from aerodynamics at the moment, and the fact that Kerbals are very durable, to try and crash land Tim. So I changed his course so that he would orbit Kerbin instead of trying going to the Moon. With Tim out of the way, I was able to flip the service module and connect it to the lander. Later on, when we separated paths from Tim, I thought let me just have a quick look at him. It turned out that Tim must have frozen because no matter how many times I tried to get him to fire his jetpack, nothing happened. Being really frustrated with Tim and having more pressing matter, I decided to leave him. Not that I really had any choice. I instead performed a capture burn with the service module to get an orbit around the Moon. I transferred Valentine, separated the lander and got ready for a landing. I decided to land in this crater. The small landing legs are the ones that fit thematically the best, but as you can see, they are way too weak. But hey, the lander was still upright and the ladder worked, so all good. Valentine planted a flag and got ready for the liftoff. The idea was to mimic Apollo 11 and have the ascent module of the lander be the only thing that got back to the service module. but I had not checked if it had anywhere near enough Delta V, which it didn't, so that plan was quickly abandoned. However, to at least give the Ascent module its 15 seconds of fame, I chose to do the docking with only the Ascent module, which went smooth. You know, disregarding the Ascent module, giving the service module a high five. Luckily, nothing more than an RCS thruster broke and we quickly docked. After discarding the Ascent module, we were on our way. I burned to change our course to smash into Kerbin later and the mission was soon over. I'm not sure I'm looking forward to when they finally introduce heat mechanics because I'm gonna forget the first couple of 100 times and burn up on entry. Anyway, the service module was decoupled, the parachutes deployed, and the command module de-landed. All in all, a successful mission. Sure, Tim was still trapped in space, but to be fair, he wasn't part of the mission in the first place, so I'll take that as a success. I really hope you liked this video, and if you're doing the weekly challenges, I hope you have a lot of fun completing them. If you feel like it, please leave a like and subscribe. And toodaloo!